Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Strand. My name is Nicholas, and I help direct the events here. For a little bit of history, the Strand was founded in 1927 over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until after over 92 years, Strand is the sole survivor, still run by the Bass family, doing 400 events a year, and still housing new and used books. Tonight, I am excited to welcome Scott Schuman for the launch of his new book, The Sartorialist, India. Based in NYC, Scott had worked in fashion marketing and branding when in the early 2000s, he began casually photographing stylish people he encountered on the street and posting the images to a weblog he called The Sartorialist. Schuman quickly garnered an avid following and went on to shoot campaigns for Gap, Verizon, Nespresso, DKNY Jeans, Absolute, and Burberry. His work resides in the permanent collections of the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum of Photography. Joining Scott in conversation this evening is Jenny Walton, a designer and illustrator also based in New York City. She graduated from Parsons School of Design with a degree in fashion design and has worked with brands such as Miu Miu, Bottega Veneta, sorry if I mispronounce any of these, I'm not very educated in the ways of fashion, Simone Rocha, Moncler, Carolina Herrera, and Tata Harper. She has been featured in publications such as Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, Glamour, InStyle, and Condé Nast Traveler. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Scott, Jenny, and the Sartorialist India to the Strand.
Thank you guys for coming. This is
Hello.
Actually the worst weather ever, so we really appreciate you all coming out tonight. This is Scott, my husband, and
This is Jenny, my wife. Thank you guys for coming. I echo Jenny's sentiment. Thank you for coming out. Such horrible weather. So this will be intimate. It will be a wonderful,
it's
intimate
like you're
little
in our
talk.
living room. We were debating bringing the dogs, and then we were like, that's too much. I know you're all like, no. They are not here, unfortunately. But anyway, so yeah, thanks for coming. I put together some questions, and then I also asked some questions from people on Instagram, so then we'll go through those as well. So the first one.
And then we'll have time for questions from the audience.
Guys, yeah.
So start thinking now, but no math questions or geography is all I ask.
I know. So first, I wanted to start by talking about the cover image of the book. And I'm always super interested when he comes back from a trip and he shows me the pictures that he's taken to get the story behind each photo and what was happening there. So curious if you could tell us, since this photo is very important and ended up becoming the cover, what the background story is.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's always, a lot of times the trick for a book, or not the trick, but one of the really challenging parts is finding the cover. It never really feels like a book until you have a clear idea of what the cover is going to be, and it's one of those things you can't really rush. When we're making the book, we start putting images up on the board, and we start figuring out what pages go together, and you just keep looking at this board, and sooner or later, one image pops out that once you see it as the cover, you can't really see another image as the cover. And Tasha was very good about being open to the idea, but showing us some of their covers. But for me, this cover was always the most obvious cover because A, it didn't look too specifically like India. If you were looking quickly at it, you may or may not be able to tell it's India. There's something modern about it. There's something classic about it. But I also like even just the physical presence of the guy. He's kind of leaning forward. He's looking at you, but with sunglasses on. So there's something that's not too... you can kind of look at him without feeling uncomfortable. He's kind of inviting the viewer to look at him. And as you could tell, he's just kind of a cool guy. When he was sitting, when I walked by, I was kind of in the middle of nowhere, just some nondescript street in Jaipur, walking with my guide. And, you know, a lot of times when I go out and walk around and shoot, we don't really have a particular place we're going. It's literally, oh, let's walk down this street, let's walk this street. We're just walking and talking, spend a lot of time asking questions about the local area. And so we're walking by, and I just looked over to my right and saw this guy sitting just exactly like this. And I just kind of stopped and looked at him, and he looked at me. And I didn't say anything to him, but I just kind of held the camera up a little, made the camera obvious, and was like, you know, obviously I wanted to shoot him. And he didn't even move. He was just kind of like, all right. The funny part was he actually had two guys sitting on either side of him. And as soon as I stopped and kind of looked at him, they could tell what I wanted to do, and they just kind of took off. But he knew, you know, and I think this is one of those indefinable things about people who are kind of like sartorialists. People ask me about people I like to shoot, and people like him know they're a cool guy. He knows, you know, he's a cool guy. He didn't seem that surprised. I'm sure he was kind of like, yeah, of course, you know, 2 or 3 people shoot me a day. Whatever. And so I think there's a certain, so to me, what I like also about the cover is that, you know, it's kind of a new direction. It's, you know, it's the sartorialist in kind of a new angle, but it also looks very much like my photographs, you know, the way I shoot and the kind of people I choose. So to me, even without having the sartorialist on the front, I think someone could look at this and say, that looks like one of Scott's shots, because it's you know, the composition I think is good, the way he's sitting is good, but there's also just some kind of there's a charisma, a visual charisma about him it's hard to say why, but you look at him and you just say, that's a cool guy. I want to party with that guy.
Which leads me to my next question. Why did you decide to do India as your 4th book? And why now? Why at this point in time did you think that was important?
These are such good questions, Jenny. Did you write all of these yourself?
I had help from the author in crafting.
No. You didn't have help from me. No, that's a great question. Why am I doing India, and why now? Well, you know, I started, as you know, this is my 4th book, and as soon as the 3rd book was kind of done and put to bed, it was the first book that we worked on together, I immediately start thinking, you know, what's the next book? I love making books. Our apartment actually kind of looks like this a lot. And so when you kind of end with 3 books, I don't know why, 3 always seems like a good set to me, that immediately I started thinking, you know, what's the next book? The first 3 books with Penguin were kind of shot all over the world and really kind of showed the comparison and contrast between different parts of the world, and you turn the page and you never knew where you were going to be next. So I wanted to do something like that for the next book, but as opposed to looking all over the world, I wanted to focus on one place and show the, you know, kind of comparison and contrast within one place. And so I started thinking about the places I had been. You know, when I started working on the Sartorialist, I was getting offers to go all over the world, and the one place that stuck out immediately was India, because what I had realized when I really thought about it was that the India that I was used to seeing in books was not the India that I had experienced. You know, when I really started thinking about my trips, you know, the India I was experiencing in Mumbai or Delhi, or if I was going for Fashion Week, was not that much different than going to New York or Chicago or Paris or whatever. But, you know, actually one of the very first things I do when I start to work on a book project or think about a book project is to come to the Strand and start looking at all the books available to see if my concept holds water. You know, I never think that my book is going to be better or worse than anybody else's. I just want it to be different. So this idea of trying to capture India in a way that captures the modern elements of India, but also the kind of classic elements of India, the poor, the rich, the growing middle class, and do it in a way that would look different and look like my photography was going to be, I thought, a great challenge. You know, I could potentially do something like this in Africa or in South America, but India seemed like the most obvious and the most surprising. And so that's why I decided to do it now, is that, I wanted to go on kind of a slightly different turn and surprise people. The one thing I've found with my social media, with Instagram and always with the blog, is that the audience is very smart. And, no one would ask me, no one from the audience would say, hey, why don't you go do a book on India? But if you want to keep an audience, I've been doing it 15 years now, and in social media, that's like 120 years. You have to surprise the audience, and you have to challenge the audience, and as opposed to kind of playing down to what they would expect, to kind of surprise them and go in this kind of surprise direction, I thought would be a fun challenge.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about the process of making a book, and your least favorite part?
Well, thanks, Jenny. My favorite part, as you know, and as you are a big part of, is, well, it's two things. Shooting, obviously, is, for me, the most fun of everything. Just having a chance to be in the middle of nowhere. Actually, it's the contrast. It's the contrast from a lot of times being in Paris one day, shooting at Fashion Week, or being in New York, shooting, in Soho, to the very next day being in Odisha, which is kind of the middle to the east in India, very simple place, not a lot of tourists, and never knowing what you're going to find. Just waking up that day and you think, in a place like India, you think, I could take the best picture of my life today. I don't know where it's going to be. I don't know what the circumstances are. I don't know what is going to happen to me in the next couple of hours. I could either be knee deep in water, taking pictures of people, planting rice. I could be in a cotton field. I could be in whatever the situation, or I could be in a beautiful cafe. But that's one of my favorite parts, is just being out in the middle of nowhere and not knowing what's going to happen next. And then the other part, the part that includes you more, is once I take those photographs and we start editing and we start putting pairs together, is taking out this kind of big whiteboard that we have and starting to lay the book out. And you're just constantly, it's always such a fun kind of recipe, because you come up with pairs, and the hard part is you'll have some images that don't seem to go with any of the other images. You have some images that go with, seems like, every image, and once you move one, it kind of is a domino effect. You might fall in love with these two images together, but then there's a problem with the image, or for some reason you can't do it, or you like this one better with that image. There's little tricks that you can do with that. Not that I should give away my tricks, but a lot of times when you're putting images together on a page, like this one is very color driven, or like this one. Wait, stop going so fast. Like
Sorry.
The two before, where it's very much about the color combination. It's very easy. And I kind of like the shape of his face and the shape of those potatoes. Kind of have a similar kind of echo to them. But then sometimes you might like the composition, but because of the colors in the image or the lighting in the image, it makes them more difficult. So a great trick is to turn one of them black and white. Mm-hmm. So then you take out that problem of color and the light becomes less dramatic. So you have a color and a black and white image. But then sometimes there's an image that doesn't go with anything, like the next one, or I think it's such an image that's so strong, right, that you'll never notice the other image on the other page. So an image like this just sits by itself.
Right.
But I don't know why that's so fun, but I guess it's just because it's such a slowly developing puzzle, because, this took 4 years to do. And so you don't even really start working on the board until 2 years into it.
Right.
And you just start doing basic combinations, because the next trip you could come home with 30 new images that totally change the shape of it. But it's unlike when I shoot on social media, for the Sartorialist in New York or Paris, where I shoot and post very quickly. This was a very different kind of project, where I shot this over 4 years, and I didn't share any of the images, or very few. So it's a really fun, slow burn of watching how the book is developing and how you think it's going and the weight of certain parts of the book and all of that. So that part is very fun.
Are there any parts that you just dread that you are not looking forward to?
Yes.
Like what?
It's not fun leaving for a trip on a Sunday night when, you know, everybody's back home and you're going to the airport and you're eating dinner, you know, at 10 o'clock in some lonely New York airport, or you're flying into Dubai airport at 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody looks out of place. It's unreal. It feels unreal.
Right.
So there's that sense of loneliness and kind of displacement.
But you kind of need that, right? Because there's been plenty of times Scott and I are walking around, whether it's New York or Paris, and he'll be like, okay, you need to go now. Like, even though we're having a fun time and like laughing and talking, you're like, you need to get out of here because I need to focus and just like be by myself to do this. Like, I still have not been to India yet because apparently I'm too distracting to go on the trips with him.
Well, look how beautiful you are. Of course you're too distracting.
Thank you. But, you know, like, it's very... that's the part that sucks about it, but then also that's how you really get in your zone, and then you're able to see things in a special way and get that right moment going, you know?
Well, it helps to be by myself, or usually when I'm shooting in a place like India, I've got a guide and a driver, but, well, I guess the guide I talk to a lot, but I don't feel bad not talking to them. If we're just walking along and I stop talking to you, I feel a little more self-conscious. But it's not so much even the process of when I'm shooting, it's the in-between time. It's when they drop you back off at the hotel. You've shot all
like
day.
When it's dark and you can't really shoot.
And it's dark and you eat by yourself, or you're tired, or you know you're getting up the next morning, so you go to bed and you're jet lagged and you go to bed because you want to get up early the next morning, but you can't sleep. So it's or if it's bad weather, and so you're there and you're feeling self-conscious that, you know, you should be working, you should be shooting, but the weather's horrible or whatever it is. So it's, the shooting part is always fun, but it's the in-between times that are the worst.
And when you are somewhere like India that's very different from where you live, how do you ask somebody to take their photo? Because I know people are always curious, like, how that goes, if you have any tricks for like how you get people to open up and how you're able to take such great portraits of people.
Well, a lot of it is intuitive. I didn't ever pick up a camera until I was 30, 32. So I'd started buying a lot of books from the Strand, probably in the mid 90s. You know, I've been in fashion for a long time, and I bought a lot of fashion photography books, and, you know, Avedon and Paolo Versi, and even, you know, photographers like Helen Levitt, you know, classic street photography. And so I think I knew how a photograph should look for years of looking at magazines and books, but I never picked up a camera until I was much older, until I had my kids, and I started shooting. Wait, what was the question? I got started on this. And then
How do you ask someone to take their photo?
Oh, yeah, okay. And so when I started shooting started shooting for myself, there were so many things that, and I never, you know, assisted anyone. I never took classes.
You're
I
also
just
kind
started
of shy
doing it
too, like as a person. So it's funny that a huge part of your job is going up to people that you don't know every day and being like, "Hi, can I take your picture?" and trying to get them to be comfortable.
Well, I didn't think it would be a thing. You know, I did this kind of for fun, whatever. It's kind of a hobby. I was watching my kids at the time. I was a stay-at-home dad, so this was kind of a nice break in the action for me. I didn't think it was going to become a thing. But as soon as I realized it was becoming a thing, I really tried to figure out how to do it as best as I could. But a lot of the things that just came naturally to me, you know, luckily there are a couple of things that are in my advantage. You know, I'm not a big scary guy. I think because I'm shy naturally, I can imagine what it's like to be someone on the other side of the camera with some strange person asking them to stop and take their picture and all of that. That's a little off-putting. So I think I do a lot of those things with that in mind. I can certainly put myself in the place of that person without noticing it. after I'd been doing it for a while, I started to realize, when I do stop somebody, I give them a lot of space. I'm very small, even if it's a guy, but if it's an older lady, you don't want them to feel uncomfortable. So I'm very small and very gentle. It took me a couple of years to be more patient and to start to realize, I'm good at this now, and to have that kind of bravado to be able to take my time, to talk to them, look at my camera, adjust a little bit, talk a little bit more, and let them kind of become more comfortable. But in a place like India, where you don't speak the language a lot of times, if you're in Mumbai or Delhi or something, Kolkata, language isn't such an issue. But in a lot of other places, language is.
With this photo, it was kind of an issue, right?
Yeah. Well, language wasn't so much on this, but a little bit. Yeah. I see where you're leading me. But, a lot of it is intuitive. It's being able to make eye contact, or, I feel what I'm doing is good. It's being done for good, and I'm comfortable and confident in what I do. So a lot of it is just being able to look at someone and have the balls to be able to say, I want to take your picture, or be able to motion that, or kind of take charge of the situation. Like the guy that's the cover, we never even spoke. It was just kind of a guy communication, kind of a head nod, or a guy that was the back cover of the third book. It was a similar situation. He was standing there. I looked at him. He looked at me, and I could tell he wasn't upset that I was going to take his picture. And then I just almost did like a half moon around him until I found the right angle and shot, and then waved and left. But then other people, if it's a young girl or something like that, you handle it differently, but you trust the situation. And for some reason, I think I'm very good at being able to read how to deal with this person. And that's for me, the most exciting part of street photography. Unlike a studio photographer that dreams of an image and then spends all of his time trying to make that dream come true, to realize that dream. For me, it's the opposite. I don't want to have any idea what's going to happen to me that day. And then when something starts to happen, you see something starting to develop. How do I act quickly in that moment to make it happen? How do I capture what I'm seeing? Or if you start to see something develop, someone's walking that way and that person, the light's there, So it's exhausting, because even though you could go 6 hours with no photographs, you've been spending 6 hours, especially when you're doing something like India, just watching all day, everywhere you walk. And so that's kind of the fun part of it.
Mm-hmm. And for this photo, you had to react kind of quickly, right?
Yeah. So this photograph I shot in Kolkata at a flower market way on the edge of Kolkata. Mm-hmm. And it was very early in the morning. And, Kolkata, if you haven't been there, it's a classic city, but almost like a Detroit or Naples of India, in a sense that it used to have a very kind of royal history, and it's very educated. It's like the people are very literate there. There's something about this kind of romance of their classicism there. But today, it's much more kind of beaten up and run down, and there's not much youth culture there, and so I was out at this flower market way on the edge of town, and I see this kid, and when I first saw him, and I asked to take his picture. I just thought he had an interesting look. He had a hoodie on, and so I asked to take his picture, but I had the sun behind him, and took the picture and looked at it, looked okay, but it was happening kind of quickly, and it was very bright because the light was behind him. I hadn't noticed until I started looking at the image on the camera that he had all these little sparkles on his face. Mm-hmm. And by the time I looked up, he had walked off, and I had said thank you, and then I was kind of looking at the back of the camera, and then I realized he had these sparkles on his face, and I thought, I missed the shot. I should have had him with the sun to his face, so the sun would really kind of hit off the sparkles. But this flower market was so crazy that once someone walks off, the chances of seeing the same person again are like nothing. Like imagine the Union Square market times 20, about the same size. No, even bigger. And so I thought, well, I probably missed this guy, but I really want to try and shoot him again. And luckily, I did see him again. So I had asked, can I take your picture again? And he was like, But he didn't really speak it. It was one of those where I was just kind of like, and do it again. And this time, I turned him around so he was facing the light. But, there's a lot of... And so I got the shot the way I wanted. And but there's so many festivals there and things like that. I said, so what's this? And he thinks for a minute and he says, rave. He had been at a rave all night. And I was like, rave? Who the hell is there a rave in Kolkata? I had seen no signs anywhere I had been that there'd be anywhere to go with a rave. Yeah. I want to party with that guy next time.
Very cool. Last question from me. You're really great at entertaining the troops at home, which would mainly be me and Boffy and Charlie and our assistant Rachel. How do you keep the energy up when you're shooting all day in India? How do you keep that momentum going?
Yeah. It's when you're shooting in a place like India, and usually what we do is we fly into a major city like Mumbai or Delhi, and then maybe I have to take a secondary flight to a slightly smaller city, and we'll kind of use that as the base. And then if we're there for 2 or 3 days, we drive, a different direction out to a village this way or out to a site over here, whatever it is, to an industrial site, to whatever it is that is good in that area. But a lot of times it takes 2 or 3 hours to get there. And so we get up very early in the morning, maybe like 4 o'clock, something. So by the time we get there, the light is coming up and we have good light.
Right. This one was outside of Mumbai, right?
This is in Delhi.
Oh, okay.
But so when you get up very early, I don't know why, but it seems like the profession of being a driver is always given to the most sleepy looking guys in India. Even if it's middle of the day, they look sleepy.
Yeah.
So when we get up in the morning at like 4 o'clock, I'm okay. The guide is almost always okay. And the driver looks so sleepy. And the scary part with that is that in India, they are the craziest, and I think it's safe to say, the craziest drivers I've ever seen anywhere. There's no patience. If there's a car in front of you, they do everything they can to get in front of that car. There is not a no passing lane, sidewalks, anything. They are getting around the car that's in front of them. And the car that is in front of them, most of them have a little thing on the back that says, honk, please honk, which means they're not going to look in the rear view mirror. You have to honk when you pull up behind them to let them know you're coming around.
So crazy.
But anyway, so when I get up in the morning, the guy looks kind of tired and stuff, so I like to hook my phone up to the car speaker, and I either play Talking Heads very loud and sing and try and get him excited and try and get him to sing along with it.
And to stay awake also.
And to stay awake, but I'm trying to get the party going. Or a lot of times the guide speaks pretty good English, and he knows usually they know a lot of kind of well-known American music. But just to kind of throw them off a little bit, I like to play Flight of the Conchords. Yeah. Which is very good music, but the lyrics really don't make much sense to someone that doesn't speak kind of slangy, funny English. So to watch the guide trying to figure out these songs, what do they say? They don't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. That's usually a lot of fun. So even if it doesn't keep them awake, it keeps me awake.
Right. Well, that's good. Then I have some questions from our readers.
Okay.
So one of them was, how in your view has Instagram changed the photography world? Because when you started, the blog was like 2005, 2006, and there was no Instagram. So how has it changed as you've gone through this whole process?
Well, the obvious answer is, everyone's a photographer now.
Yeah.
Which in a way is true. Mm-hmm. I think everybody has, 1 or 2 great images in them, in their life that they'll shoot.
In their camera roll.
In their camera roll. But it doesn't mean that they're a photographer. Anyone can kind of luck into an image. If anything, I think it makes the job of a kind of a trained photographer even more valuable, because there's so many kind of mediocre images out there that to find really great images, I think means even more. But for me personally, Instagram really changed and challenged me to shoot in a different way, not just with the phone, which it did, but also to leave your eyes open more, because usually when I'm shooting with the big camera, it's almost always portraits, whether full body or close portraits. I shoot with a 50 lens, which doesn't really allow you to shoot a landscape as well, or a building, because it's very narrow. But if you're shooting with, if I have the camera, the big camera, and my phone, now I have two totally different things, because the phone is much more open. It's probably like a 25 or something, so you can now shoot a building or something. And so the thing that was really great with Instagram in the beginning for me was a real challenge to constantly keep my eyes open for different kind of photographs, because even though in the past I might only be able to shoot something with the big camera that's a portrait, now I had something that was much more open, and I could shoot it with the phone, a building, or a mannequin or something like that. So it was a great challenge. It really started challenging me to keep my eyes open for everything, not just portraits, but anything else. And sooner or later, that started to translate back to the big camera. So like when I go to a place like India, I've usually, I like to sit in the front seat, not in the back seat, next to the driver. And I usually have 2 or 3 cameras with me, one with a 50, one with like a 25-75, one maybe with a 120, and you're just constantly watching. And it might be, oh, stop the car, there's a person there I want to shoot, or there's a building, or there's a landscape, or what's going on. And so I think, I don't know if I would have been able to shoot this book quite the same way, because there is more landscape in this book than I've ever shot before, architecture, sports, or an even image like this, that I must have shot with like, probably like the 70 millimeter or the 70-25, because you need to get something a lot wider. There's a lot more information in that image that you can't really shoot with a 50. That was my Steve McCurry shot, because I was standing there walking all around this thing, shooting all these different locations, but there's nobody there. And you like to have something in the foreground of an image sometimes to give a little sense of scale or whatever. And then out of nowhere comes this guy walking. I hadn't seen, and you can kind of see pretty far. Yeah. I don't know where he came from, but that was such a nice surprise that he walked right where I needed him to be.
That must be a big part of being a street photographer, though. You're just constantly waiting for like the perfect moment to happen. Perfect
moment, or you resign yourself to the fact that there's very few perfect moments.
Yeah.
The thing I'm jealous of, like a fashion photographer, is that they've got assistants and light and this and that, and even if they're street photographer, if they're shooting on the street, they've got a lot of stuff that can help, and they can keep a lot of control. Yeah. They can decide, this is my color story. This is the kind of color saturation I will always do. This is the kind of lighting I will always do.
Right.
And if you're a street photographer, you just know you're in so many different situations. I've got to shoot this the way it is. It might not work with all the other colors that I like to do, whatever. But if you're a photographer, you shoot what you're presented, right, basically.
Is there a style that you would never shoot? Which and why not?
That must be from my good friend Mark Ingram, who was a little bit late, came in a little bit late, but thank you for coming. Is there a style I said? No, a lot of people ask me that, and I would never do that. The reason I go out and shoot every day is I like to be surprised by things. I like to see something new. I like to, if I was only shooting things that I liked, then there would be no reason to go out there. I like cowboy boots. I hate cowboy boots. I don't know why. It's where I grew up. I don't know, whatever it was, I don't like cowboy boots. But when I was in Las Vegas, there just happened to be a rodeo there. And these guys were at the rodeo, and they had the cowboy boots on, but the thing I had never seen is those particular guys would take like, not a string, but I guess it was like a leather strap or something, and tie it around the ankle of their boots to make them tighter, I guess, so they don't go flying off when they're on the back of the bull. And it totally changed the shape of it. It totally made them look totally different. And I was like, that's not too bad. That's kind of cool. Not that I would do it,
right,
but it like totally changed the shape of it. And I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I like to be surprised.
Right. Did you ever take a photo without giving it much importance and it became one of your favorites?
Well, Yes, but not because of me, but because Jenny likes to go over and look through my images and see what I shot and kind of follow along with me. And so one of the pictures that's in the book, is it in here?
Which one? Oh, the house.
Yeah. Here, the one on your right. I had taken this photograph, and these are guys that work in the fish market, and because they're carrying these, kind of like tubs and boxes full of fish on their head all day, they wear these kind of plastic hats, so to try and keep some of the water and all the stinky fish stuff off of them. And so I had taken this portrait, and I really liked this one, and I kept trying to find an image to go with it. And yeah, from this angle, the colors don't look so good. From that, it's better. But I was trying to find an image to go with it, and I was having a hard time. And so Jenny had found this one on the right side that I remember taking, but I just, for some reason, it never really hit me. And so Jenny kind of put it up there, and I think you even cropped it a little bit, or you did something to it.
Sometimes I like to go through the archives late at night with a glass of wine and see what I can find. And because he is just so like moving, go throughout the day when he's shooting. So a lot of times he'll really quickly shoot something, and then he just kind of forgets about it. So I like to go through with a second eye and be like, okay, maybe he forgot something. Maybe if I maybe if I tweak the color, this one, I think we cropped into, and yeah.
Well, that's why you're a good partner. But like an image like this, I hadn't really seen, but then once she had shown it to me in a different way, slightly cropped, and then I looked and I was like, oh yeah, I really like it. It looks like a shot like from the 1950s or something, guys like hanging out at a soda fountain or something, one of those kind of like drive up
around their car
soda places or something.
Yeah. Someone else asked, are you a spontaneous or considered portraitist?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what that means, but...
What do you think it means?
Well, I think I'm spontaneous, because I never know who I'm going to see, what the situation is, whatever, which I like that. But once I decide I'm going to shoot somebody, then it goes a lot slower. Like I said, I've learned how to take my time. I've learned this wonderful trick that, if you stop somebody, at first they're kind of flustered, and sometimes that works very well, that kind of odd energy that you have works kind of well in a shot. But a lot of times people, they're still kind of like figuring out who's this guy, especially if I'm not shooting in New York or Milan or somewhere typical. Who's this guy? And before I'd kind of rush through it. And so now I've learned to take my time. I shoot them. I think they realize, oh, he's not just trying to take a fast picture. He's actually trying to take a nice photograph of me.
I think you're really considered, because I've gone to Fashion Week before, and there can be like hundreds of photographers, and they're just popping up, snapping real quick, and just moving on like crazy. And you really bring a slow presence to it. And you'll kind of like slightly have the person change, where their head might be, so that the light looks really great. Maybe the light's like reflecting off of a building, and then, you are, I think, a lot more considered than a lot of people are in such a quick paced environment that you're typically working in.
Well, and I think a lot of people think that my photographs are fashion photography, which it is in a sense, but oddly enough, I think my best photographs are portraits. I think of it more as best photographs are portraits like this. I think this guy looks great. I think it's a portrait. And the clothes just help tell you a little bit about who he is, what he might do, and who that person is. Yeah, I mean, I don't... I do feel that I'm a little bit of a fashion editor when I'm shooting, but I never shoot something because, oh, that's a Prada bag, or that's the fashion element of it.
Right.
A lot of times I'm just as happy to have no idea what it is I'm shooting, but I've decided, and I've been saying this a lot lately, that I feel more like when I'm photographing, as opposed to feeling like an editor, I feel more like a costume designer, and how a costume designer uses the clothes to help tell you about the character of the person in a movie or a play. A lot of times I think the clothes help tell you about who that person might be, and how that helps you understand a little bit about who their character is. So for me, the portrait and the idea of the photograph of the person is number one. and whatever that kind of visual charisma is, whether it's a close portrait, a full body, 3/4, but that's hardly ever driven by the fashion. It's always kind of, what is the feeling I'm getting from this person? And that's usually much more important than just, a quick snap of that, Prada jacket or something.
Right. So where will you go to next to explore color, style, and culture is the last question.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, hopefully, and Rule, my editor, is not here, so I can't guilt him into it like I did on the other talk, but hopefully the next book that we're working on now, Rachel, you, and I, is a book about menswear that will come out about this time next year. And so that's going to be fun. And again, it's like a total 180 to another direction. It was very fun when I was actually kind of working on both books at the same time, the India book and early work on the menswear book, to one day, be working on India images, and the next day writing and working with you on illustrations on how to tie a tie or a bow tie or all the kind of stuff that's going to be in the men's book. And what I like is the challenge of, now I've done a men's book, now that we're working on that, we're starting an early process of figuring out, do we want to do the next book in Africa? Do we want to do the next book South America? Because I think both of those also offer a similar mix of images and a certain similar mix of diversity. So hopefully that will be next. And then after that book, hopefully I get to do a book about you or with you on Jenny's wonderful style. I'm not saying that it would be called a certain Jenny sais quoi. Je sais quoi.
It's a working title.
It's a working title. It's trademark, so don't steal it. But something like that. So I don't know exactly what it would be, but I would like to work on a women's book, because actually that's a bigger part of my audience is women's. That's the vast majority of my background. Mm-hmm. And you're so great that I think it'd be really fun.
Oh, thank you. What's the deal with this photo here? I really love this.
Yeah.
Speaking of portraits that he's really good at, I loved this one.
And the trouble you have putting together a book.
Yeah.
This photograph I loved forever, and I had a couple of places, different partners I thought it would go with, but for some reason, for quite a while, we could not find the raw image. And I think what happened, I don't know what happened, I still don't know what happened to that day, but I know when I was shooting this guy, he was friends with 2 or 3 other girls around there, and I knew one of the girls just a little bit from having shot her before. And so when I was taking his picture, she was standing behind me, taking Instagram shots of me shooting him, and then I found out later she had posted it like that day, and I was so mad because I thought, well, I'm shooting this for a book. Why are you sharing photographs of me that I want to say, that I want to say for this book? So I think in a very awkward moment, I deleted like a half a day's worth of photographs because I was so mad that she would do that. But I don't end up thinking that's what happened, but that's what I thought for a while. But we couldn't find the raw. Finally, somehow we found it.
I don't.
And but I just love the fact of a shot like this where the kid has dreadlocks and it's kind of multicolor and, I don't know, and it's the expression. It was just one of those kind of magical moments where, again, you shoot a lot of people and you never know which ones are going to work, if it's going to create the right emotion in the photograph and how it's going to mix in with the rest of them.
Were you surprised by a lot of the younger people in India? Because I feel like a lot of the India books we were looking at doing research for this book would be focused on yoga or religion or,
temples
or just really rural life in India, but you weren't seeing too much about like kids that lived in the cities. Were you surprised when you were shooting?
Well, I wasn't surprised. Mm-hmm. I knew it was there, and that was kind of the juxtaposition of the book. The trick was coming up with enough of that so it could make an important statement in the book. And that took going to a lot of music festivals, going to sporting events, trying to find places where kids hang out in India. And, outside of somewhere like Mumbai, that's not so easy because there's not the same kind of prevalent youth culture that you have here. Not like you can say, oh, let's go down to Union Square and see the kids hanging out skateboarding. You don't have that really in India. I guess it's there a little bit, but it's much more hidden. Maybe in a place like Chennai that's a little bit younger, but That was the thing I was happy and was probably the biggest challenge, was to try and find that. Instagram helps a lot. Once you kind of find one kid, you start watching them, and then you start seeing where they're going. So it was a great way to kind of do a little behind the scenes research even before we got there. But that was the thing, what I loved. And actually when I was selling the book early to a couple, because I probably shot half of this before I even started showing it to any publishers, one of the editors was flipping through and he'd say, yeah, this looks like a good book on indie. He goes, but I don't understand some of these pictures. They don't really fit in with the other ones. They look like you shot them in New York or something. They don't really fit in. And I said, exactly. That's exactly the entire point of this book, is that India is becoming so much more diverse. It doesn't look like what you typically think India looks like, or what you're seeing in books right now, and you're just now starting to see a little bit more in broader culture. So the fact that we were able to get that, and even there's a young guy in the book, that's transitioning now. By the time the book came out, he's fully a woman. She is fully a woman. That we were able to kind of find those different kind of elements and mix it in the book. That's something I was very proud of, that we were able to get that kind of mix.
So that's all the questions I have, but was wondering if any of you guys have any questions. We have time to take some, and there's a mic in the back.
Hi.
Hey.
First of all, I would definitely purchase Je ne sais quoi. I'm just going to throw that out.
Okay, good. One sale. Yay.
But I think that there seems to be a large element of artistic hypervigilance, I would say. To do what you do, you kind of have to always be looking and mentally curating and always be on, so to speak. And I'm wondering, does that impact you in your personal life? Do you feel like you're able to turn that off, or do you feel like you actually sometimes maybe don't live in the moment because of that?
For me, no, I can always turn it off. It's very easy because I want to, if I only wanted to do this for a short amount of time, I would feel more pressure to always be on and always be in the moment shooting. But I want to do this for 40 years. I want to do this for the rest of my life. So, I allow myself, I don't feel like shooting today, or the light's not right, or I'm on vacation. I always take my camera on vacation, but I know I'm probably not going to do it because when to be watching the way you need to watch, to be interacting, like Jenny said, I'm more naturally shy. So it's takes a certain amount of effort to have to walk up to someone you don't know, try to do it the right way, talk to them, make them comfortable. It's a stretch. So you have to be in the right mindset. Which the problem that leads to is not when you're shooting someone for the first time, but when you run into someone that you've shot a lot in the past and you talk to them, and maybe you've always shot them when you see them, when you happen to run into them, and then that day you're just not in the mood, or the light's not right, or whatever, and then you say, all right, bye, and you walk away, and you didn't take a picture of them, and you can kind of feel them in the background going, what's wrong with me today? Why didn't he take a picture of me? And sooner or later, they get used to it, and they realize when I'm in the right mood and everything's right, I'll take a picture. If it's not, I won't. But I think that's the difference between me and a lot of the other people shooting at Fashion Week. They're paid, by the photograph they turn in and all of that, so they shoot a lot more. Bill Cunningham shot a lot more, where I'm much more picky.
Yeah.
And so I find that it's not the vast quantity that I shoot, but it's being much, and because I'm the final editor, a lot of the other photographers are giving their images to editors, letting them decide. Since I'm the editor, I already know, what I want to shoot, what I don't want to shoot. I pretty much know once I have the image in the camera. So for me, it's very easy to decide now I'm ready to shoot.
Yeah, I definitely have that problem. I'm always even when we're on vacation or something, I'm constantly taking pictures of, I really like mundane things, so I'm constantly taking a million pictures of everything and then wanting to share it and post it immediately. So I definitely have a problem turning off.
What was a moment that you remember, the beginning of you wanting to branch out and doing your own thing, starting your own website, and doing street style?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had already had my own business. In 1999, I opened my own showroom. I had worked at Valentino and GFT, had always worked in fashion, so I had already done an entrepreneurial thing of working on my own in 1999, which went great until 9/11, and then that created a big problem. And so it was after I probably closed the showroom maybe like a year after that, because people just weren't paying their bills. No new designers were coming out. No one was opening up after that. So I kind of, until I figured out what I wanted to do next, started watching my kids and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And while I was watching them, started taking photographs of them. And I really enjoyed it. I loved it. For the first time, I found something I wanted to take photographs of, and I'd sit in my apartment after I put the kids to sleep and would look at the images and my books and think, why don't my images look like Steve McCurry's images? And slowly taught myself, how to make my photographs better. And once I really thought, wow, I really like this, and I think I'd show my dad. My dad was very artistic, great writer and all of this, and but tough, like he didn't gash you up, so to speak, as the kids say. And so I'd show him some of the pictures, and he'd go, oh, wow, that's pretty good. So the fact that he liked the images, I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And then being a competitive person that I am and wanting to do something better, I thought, okay, well, shooting kids is fun, but what's the one thing I can do differently than anybody else? And I thought what I know about fashion, both men's and women's, is different than most of the other people I know. Like I said, the bigger part of my audience is women's. Most sites, people that do Instagram or a blog, either they have a very big women's audience or a very big men's. Very few can do men's and women's. I knew I liked to shoot on the street, so I thought, okay, well, Bill Cunningham's the only one kind of doing this. I like what he does, I respect what he does, but my point of view is very, very different. So I thought, and it's free, to do a blog at that time was free. So I thought, all right, I'll try this. And so it wasn't a hard decision. I didn't think it was going to be anything. Thought it was just a nice artistic expression to do while I was watching my kids. I was having such a great time doing that. But, the world kind of jumped on it, and it went from nowhere to, within a year, I had, my own page in GQ under my own name, getting to shoot whatever I want and write whatever I want. I was doing style.com. I was doing my site. So I went from, a dad taking his kid to the park to, within a year, having so many outlets, and then just figuring out, all right, God's given me this, or somebody's given me this great challenge. And at the time I had no money and a young family, and I thought, all right, I got to turn the gas on. This is it. I'm never going to have this kind of opportunity. And it comes easily. I found something that came easily to me, so it wasn't, like now working on the men's book, writing is much more difficult. It's hard, and I could never do that a lot. But the photography came very easy. I knew exactly what I wanted, how I wanted to shoot it. So at that point, when you hit an opportunity and you can feel it, the world is telling you this is what you should be doing, then it was easy. Then it was just trying to keep up. And, my first organized, because I taught myself, my first organized photo shoot was for English Elle magazine, British or UK Elle is what they would call it. And I turned up to the set, and there were all these people there, and people looking at me and wanted me to do stuff and hair and makeup and all that. And finally I said, well, you guys have to go around the corner. You get the person ready, then I'll take them, and you guys stay. I don't want to see you. I don't even want to know you're there. And then, because they wanted me to shoot like me, so I had to, be strong enough to tell them, don't get in between the shot, all this, just you get them ready, I'll take them out, I'll shoot it, and I'll bring it back, which is hard to do when it's your first experience doing that. And then my second experience was shooting, the DKNY ad campaign that season, which was like 8 huge trucks, a huge truck for men's costume, for men's wardrobe, for women's makeup, everything. And so pretty quick I realized I did not want to become an editorial photographer, a photographer like that, because that's a lot of pressure. It's not fun. It's not quick. And when you say something, people do it. When you say, oh, I kind of like to have a cappuccino, they show up with a cappuccino and a latte and a this thing. I don't like that. I like just going out and getting lost. So it's one of those things you have to jump on the opportunity and then figure out exactly what you want to do that you can do for a long time.
All right. When I look through your book, it really screams like color blocking to me. And it makes me wonder, how much do you two influence each other artistically?
Good question.
Good question.
Well, we are together 24 hours a day, every day. So
as you can see, we're wearing similar shoes today.
our clunkiest shoes. Yeah, would you say I influence you?
Of course. Jenny is my number one sounding board. I have incredible respect for her taste level and for her point of view, and but in a way that can be critical. I'm not asking her to agree with me. I like her challenging, what I think, and I like when I feel if I'm not sure of something, I go to her and I try to explain it to her, and I trust that she's going to say, yeah, that's working, or no, it's not.
Yeah.
Or whatever the situation is. So she doesn't necessarily influence the way I shoot or what I shoot, but it's usually the more kind of post-production. What do I do with it? Shooting is just something so innate. I can't even really explain it. It is what it is. I don't worry about the audience. I don't worry about anything else. I just shoot what I see, what I think is right. And then I have to figure out afterwards what to do with it. And that's where someone like Jenny comes in. If I'm thinking about a new project, and it's, and to be quite honest, and probably the nicest thing I could say is Jenny takes the role that my dad used to have, where when I would have an idea, I would talk to him and he would kind of play devil's advocate and all of this, and I'd have to kind of explain it to him, knowing that he was going to kind of take the opposite side to challenge me to make sure I really thought it all through. And that's kind of the wonderful role that Jenny plays now.
90% of the time that he says he wants to make an image black and white, I'm like, no, how could you? I get so mad because I feel like the color always tells an important part of the story. And I love looking at photos from like the 50s or the 60s and seeing like the color to me always stands out. So whenever he wants to do that, and it's always because, he's like, the light is slightly different in them. I'm like, that doesn't matter. It's more important to get the color story in there. So we definitely in that way. Too.
Yeah. But, the thing that's, again, if you want to do something different, there's a lot of great color and there's color blocking in the book, but there's a lot of black and white images because, everybody I would tell I'm doing a book on India, they'd say, oh, the color, which is true, but there's also pattern. The way they mix pattern is great. The way they proportion, when you take that kind of cliche element away from it, you can notice better, the way they drape, the way they mix patterns, the way they mix different kind of elements, proportion, all these other kind of things. So I'm actually happy that quite a large percentage of the images are black and white because it kind of challenges. It makes you look at those images in a different way. It takes away that cliche and then makes you look, oh wow, look at the draping on that. Look how they mix those two patterns or something, or the texture. It even brings out texture better. So that is where we have those kind of arguments. So I have to kind of state my case, plead my case, why I think it should be black and white. And then I hear her opinion, and then I always end up making the final decision, but it's always with a real respect and a real weight of what she says.
Hello. So I think maybe in the US, sometimes it kind of feels like people get dressed as like a functional type of thing. There maybe is a lot less flair to like how people are thinking about getting ready in the morning. In India, do you feel like people had like a lot more of a conscious effort being made, no matter like what social status or economic status they had? Like, did you feel like people care more?
Well, it really is different because there's so many different levels there. So if you're in the upper level, I think they do care more. They're very much on the internet. They're very conscious of how they present themselves in a way that I think we're not even here in America. The weddings, everyone's very familiar with the weddings and how important that is. And the sense of occasion is still very important in India. So if you're at that certain level, I think there is more effort and more conscious thought into how they put themselves together. And the middle class, which is growing and growing, it's more like here, the young kids, put together clothes in a way to express themselves. But, guys like this, the guy here on the left side, on your left side, he works as a porter in the market in Mumbai, in Crawford's Market. And him and a group of guys, I guess they come from, my guide said they probably all come from the same village, and everything they wear is a different plaid. So, and I think that kind of signifies the village they come from, the place they come from. So the thing that I think a lot of people in the West like to say, or I see these comments on Instagram a lot, oh, how can you make that fashion? These are poor people with no money, and they're just wearing whatever they can wear. But that's obviously not true. I mean, a lot of these people live a very simple life. But to say that they can't make decisions for themselves or act like they're not able to make decisions because they have very little money is completely ridiculous. I think it minimizes who they are as people. I've been in these markets a lot and watched these guys on their working days and their days off, and there's always carts going around with different kind of clothes at all different price points, or guys like this, buy these kind of lungis and things, at markets where they've got a huge amount of choice. They're not expensive, but I've watched those guys, decide, I want this one or that one, and just like anywhere else in the world, some of them are more conscious and they say, I really like that color with that. And there are a lot of photographs in the book where you can tell, because the color is done so perfectly, a little accent here or there, you can tell which guys are really consciously, I don't know if we have a specific shot, but there are quite a few shots in the book where you can tell it's really consciously chosen because the colors are done so well together. But then there are other guys who are just buying whatever they want. But that's something I'm really proud of in the book, that you can tell that there's something very positive and I think very pro-people about guys. Like here, it's hard to tell with these colors, but I mean, there's no way it's just a coincidence that, that color in his T-shirt here between his pants and the other T-shirt is the exact accent color that's in his scarf, and that the grays kind of match the grays in the floral. There are a lot of, and this is in that same market in Kolkata, there are a lot of examples where, and I could watch the guys like really look and kind of deciding, not all of them, but quite a few, where they're like, oh, I like this one or this one. I don't have a lot of money. I'll probably be wearing a lot of this stuff over and over again in a heavy rotation. So I think they do take a lot of time deciding what they're going to wear, even at the most simple level, which is something I really wanted to bring out in the book, that, you don't have to have a lot of money to look great. I don't really write about it in the book, but I think the images show you that, it's not a crime to be poor. If you're poor, you can live a wonderful, creative life. There's challenges, but I think there's something very positive in that. And so, yeah, I think it's the more you travel and the more you go to places like this, the more you see how different they are, but more than that, you see how similar people are, how they want to express themselves, how they want to live a life that they want to live and still try to feel some control of their environment and control of their setting in any way that they can. So hopefully that's one of the subtle things that you see in the book that brings a little more humanity to people in all different economic levels.
Thank you so much. Great question.
Let's have a round of applause for Scott and Jenny, please. Thank you both for having this discussion tonight. Hey folks, you're gonna hear me repeat myself a little bit. So we're gonna do the signing at this point. Scott will sit here, and then I will come by to give you each a Post-it note.